Right, let's get into it. Today, we're not just reading a play. Oh no, we are dissecting George Bernard Shaw's Pygmalion as the brilliant, witty, and honestly shockingly relevant social experiment that it truly is. So let me ask you this, right off the bat. Is your destiny decided by the way you speak? I mean, really think about it. Have you ever sized someone up just based on their accent? Or maybe felt like someone was judging you for yours? Well, Shaw was asking this exact same question more than 100 years ago, and it's the central hypothesis for the wild experiment we're about to watch unfold. Okay, so let's set the stage for this hypothesis. Our whole experiment kicks off on a rainy night in London's Covent Garden. And this isn't just some storm, you know? It's the catalyst. It's the one event that forces all these rigid layers of society to literally smash into each other. For a moment, the rain acts like this great equalizer. You've got wealthy socialites and a poor flower girl all huddled together trying to stay dry. They're sharing the same physical space, but as Shaw shows us so brilliantly, socially, they might as well be on different planets. This shared shelter, it's the perfect little petri dish for our experiment. And this is where our lead scientist storms onto the scene, Professor Henry Higgins. Now, he's not a sociologist or anything like that. He's a professor of phonetics. And for him, your accent isn't just about how you talk, it's your entire identity. It's like a social price tag he can read in a second. And here's the kicker, he believes he can change it. This line right here, this is the experiment's hypothesis. It's not some kind of promise of a better life. It's a boast. It's pure ego. Higgins looks at Eliza Doolittle and doesn't see a person. He sees raw data. He sees a scientific challenge. Her curbstone English, as he calls it, is just a variable that he is dying to manipulate. So let's head over to Higgins' laboratory on Wimpole Street, because this is where the hypothesis becomes a full-blown, formal experiment. It gets funding and, well, our human subject is officially acquired. And here's how it all goes down. Eliza herself actually shows up at his door. She wants to pay him for lessons so she can get a better job in a flower shop. But Higgins couldn't be less interested until his colleague, Colonel Pickering, turns it into a game. Pickering bets Higgins that he can't do it, that he can't pass her off as a duchess. And just like that, by offering to pay for the whole thing, the experiment is on. Listen to the words Higgins uses here. They're so deliberately dehumanizing. He sees her as an object, something to be cleaned up, polished, and then put on display. He's Pygmalion, the sculptor, totally obsessed with his art, but completely, utterly detached from the living, breathing person he's molding. Now this is where Shaw gets really clever. He introduces a control variable. You've got Higgins and Pickering, both are high-class gentlemen, but their behavior totally different. Pickering treats Eliza with kindness and respect from the moment he meets her. And this sets up a huge theme for the whole play. Maybe being a lady has less to do with how you talk and a whole lot more to do with how you're treated. And then this guy shows up, Alfred Doolittle, Eliza's father, an absolute gem of a character. He strolls in to basically extort £5 from Higgins. He is, without a doubt, the play's sharpest satirical voice, and he just hilariously tears apart the hypocrisy of middle-class morality, arguing that, hey, he can't afford to have morals. He's a walking, talking critique of the very social system Higgins is trying to game. All right, now we get to the first big test run. Higgins gets this brilliant idea to show off his progress by taking Eliza to his mother's very proper, very stuffy social gathering. You could call this the experiment's first public trial. And at first the results are, well, they're stunning. Visually, Eliza is a complete success. She looks the part, she's gorgeous, and when she opens her mouth, her pronunciation is flawless. Every vowel is perfect. It really seems like Higgins is about to win his bet. But then, she actually starts telling a story. So while her sounds are perfect, the actual content of her speech is straight from the London slums. She tells this grimly funny story about her family, casually dropping all kinds of slang, and then she caps it all off with this absolute bombshell of a line which just floors the entire room, and of course makes us love her even more. This whole scene is pure comedic gold because it just perfectly exposes the massive flaw in Higgins's experiment. He changed the how of her speech, but he completely ignored the what. What he's created is basically a perfect talking doll, a doll that can make all the right upper-class sounds, but still thinks and feels like a Covent Garden flower girl.
He's only fixed the surface, not the substance.
So after that, let's call it a disastrous but hilarious test run. What have we actually learned? We're looking at the fatal flaw in Higgins' whole experiment, and this is even before the final test at the big ambassador's ball. So here's where we stand. Here's our progress report. Subject acquired? Check. The process of cleaning her up and drilling her on phonetics? Check. But a fundamental critical flaw has been revealed. You can teach a parrot to speak beautifully, but at the end of the day, it's still a parrot. The person inside Eliza is totally disconnected from this new exterior that Higgins has built for her. And that brings us to the most important question in the entire play, asked by the only person with any real sense, Higgins' mother. While Higgins and Pickering are totally obsessed with winning their little game, she sees the human cost. What happens after the experiment is over? They've created something they have absolutely no plan for. They've played God with a human life, and now, what? What happens to her now? All right, let's talk about Pygmalion. George Bernard Shaw's classic play. Most movies and stage versions, they tend to stop right after the big fancy ball. But that's not the end, not even close. The real story, the much more interesting part, is what happens right after. So let's just get right into it. The whole experiment worked. The flower girl passed for a duchess, the bet was won, so happily ever after, right? Well, not quite, especially not for the person at the very center of it all. She should be celebrating, but instead she is absolutely filled with rage. Why? Okay, so picture this. It's midnight. We're back in Professor Higgins' lab right after that huge ambassador's ball. And by all accounts, Eliza Doolittle was a total triumph. I mean, she didn't just pass as a duchess. People were whispering she might be actual royalty. So the experiment is officially over, a success. But what's happening in that room? Wow. It's a total disconnect. For Higgins and Pickering, the whole thing was, a bit of a bore. And thank God it's over. They won. They can move on. But then you have Eliza just standing there, completely silent, trembling. For her, this isn't a victory. It's terrifying. It's the end of her life as she knew it, and she has no idea what comes next. And you notice they're talking about her, but nobody is talking to her. They're slapping each other on the back, celebrating their own genius. And in all this, they're treating their masterpiece, this living, breathing person, like a suitcase they can finally stash away. The actual human being inside the fancy dress, she's become completely invisible. And right here, this is the moment. This is where that whole fairy tale idea just shatters. The object of their little experiment is about to become the subject of her own story. Higgins, totally oblivious, just casually asks her to go find his slippers, like nothing has changed, like she's still just the help. And she just snaps. This isn't just a tantrum, it's a full-blown rebellion. All that fear and fury comes pouring out, and she demands to know what becomes of me now. The bet is over, so what is she? And what she says next is it's absolutely devastating. Now you've made a lady of me, I'm not fit to sell anything else. Think about that. As a poor flower girl, she was independent. She had a job. She sold flowers, not herself. But now, with this fancy accent and proper manners, she's trapped. She's been educated right out of her old life, but she has no way to survive in this new one, except maybe by selling herself in marriage. So you see her declare her independence, not with some big speech, but with these incredibly powerful actions. Throwing the slippers at him, that's her saying, I'm not your little fetch dog anymore. Giving back a ring he bought for her, that's her severing the personal tie between creator and creation. And then, walking out that door into the night, that's not just running away. That's her taking the first step to get her own life back. Okay, let's jump to the next morning. We're at Mrs. Higgins' house. Higgins and Pickering are there, totally panicking because Eliza's vanished. And right then, we get to see another crazy transformation that really puts Eliza's whole situation into this sharp, kind of ironic perspective. In walks her father, Alfred Doolittle. But he's not the happy-go-lucky dustman anymore. Oh, no. He's dressed to the nines in a wedding suit, and he looks absolutely miserable. Turns out, Higgins had jokingly told a rich American about Doolittle, and that American then died and left the man a fortune. So Doolittle has been launched right into that middle-class morality he always made fun of, and he is furious about it. And the contrast here between father and daughter is just so brilliant.
Eliza was transformed by knowledge, by hard work, and she's fighting for her soul. Her dad, though, he was transformed by a random chunk of money, and it's completely destroyed his freedom and happiness. You can really see what Shaw is trying to say here about class and what we think of as moving up in the world.
This all leads to the real showdown, the intellectual climax of the entire play. Because when Eliza finally shows up, she's not hysterical anymore, she's calm, she's composed, and she is ready to confront her maker. The statue is no longer silent. She is about to speak. And then she says it. She delivers the entire point of the whole play in one single brilliant line. And she doesn't even say it to Higgins. She directs it at Colonel Pickering. She thanks him because, she explains, he's the one who really taught her to be a lady. Why? Because he always treated her like one. And that's the huge realization for her. Her real worth isn't about her accent or her clothes. It's about being treated with basic human dignity. To Higgins, with all his bullying, she'll always be that girl he picked up from the gutter. But to Pickering, with his simple acts of courtesy, he saw the lady in her from the very beginning. And then, for the finishing move, Eliza asserts her ultimate independence. She threatens to become a phonetics teacher herself. She'll use the very methods Higgins taught her, and hey, maybe she'll even steal some of his students. This is her Frankenstein moment. The creation turning around and proving she's not just the creator's equal, but a real force to be reckoned with. So you can probably guess, George Bernard Shaw deliberately and brilliantly refuses to give the audience the neat little romantic comedy ending they're all expecting. Sorry, everyone, there are going to be no wedding bells for Eliza and the professor. And for the first time, you really feel like Higgins sees her. Not as his project, not as a flower girl, but as this strong, independent woman. He's angry, he's insulted, but you know what? He's also really genuinely impressed. He realizes he didn't just create a duchess, he helped create a true equal. So the resolution here isn't a wedding. It's not about two people coming together. It's about one person finding the strength to walk away on her own terms. Shaw himself said the ending wasn't a marriage, it was a divorce. That final, totally necessary separation of the student from the teacher, the creation from her creator. But the play ends on this wonderfully tricky note. Higgins is left all alone and he's laughing, totally sure that she'll come back to fetch his slippers eventually. So that's the final question, isn't it? Has he truly understood the incredible woman she's become? Or, in his mind, is she still just his greatest experiment? Shaw just leaves it there for us to decide. You know the old story, right? A man creates his perfect woman, and she magically comes to life and falls madly in love with him. Well, today we're diving into George Bernard Shaw's Pygmalion, a play that grabs that ancient myth by the collar and completely turns it on its head to ask some really sharp questions about class, power, and what it actually means to be free. So how exactly did Shaw pull this off? Well, here's our plan. We'll start with the original mess, and then we're going to see how he systematically reworked every single piece of it. The creator, the creation, how the transformation happens, and crucially, that explosive moment when the so-called statue finally comes to life. Okay, so first things first, we have to be clear about something. Shaw was not just trying to tell a nice, updated version of an old story. Oh no. He was basically hijacking a famous myth to put his own society on trial. I mean, this slide pretty much says it all, doesn't it? On one side, you've got this beautiful fairy tale romance, touched by the gods. And on the other, a gritty, complicated, and very human social experiment that doesn't end with wedding bells, but with a full-blown rebellion. All right, let's get to the real heart of the drama, the people involved. Because Shaw's characters aren't just new and improved versions of the originals, they are total opposites, and that's exactly where all the sparks begin to fly. So, right off the bat, Shaw just throws out the adoring artist and replaces him with a cold, scientific bully. The original Pygmalion creates his statue out of love. Professor Higgins, he does it because of a bet, because of his massive ego. The whole motivation gets flipped from love to pride. And this, right here, gets to the absolute core of the whole problem. In the myth, Galatea is an object. She's a beautiful blank slate made of ivory. But Eliza Doolittle, she's a person, a real, living, breathing human being. The entire conflict of the play comes from Higgins's colossal mistake. He tries to sculpt a human soul as if it were just a piece of rock. Okay, so if the people and their motivations are so different, what about the actual transformation? Well, in Shah's world, you can forget about a goddess showing up to wave a magic wand. What he gives us is something way more brutal. Yeah, Shah just rips all the magic and romance right out of the process. He swaps the gentle, divine touch of a goddess for the agonizing reality of phonetic drills and psychological warfare. This isn't some beautiful gift from the heavens. It's a painful, scientific process that shows you the real, ugly cost of trying to change who you are. And just listen to how Higgins talks about it himself. He doesn't think he's elevating a person. He thinks he's taming a savage. To him, Eliza isn't a student. She's an experiment. He is completely, 100% blind to the human being right in front of him. And this brings us to the ultimate question, doesn't it? What happens when the thing you're trying to mold, to control, suddenly starts thinking for itself? For Shah, this is the real beginning of the story, and his idea of coming to life is a world away from the original myth. All right, here we go. This is the big one. This is the moment where Shah doesn't just reinvent the myth, he takes a sledgehammer to it. Because in his version, awakening isn't about falling in love with your creator, it's about finding your own damn voice. I mean, really let that sink in. In the original myth, to come to life means to become a wife. Your life is defined by the man who made you. But for Shah, to gain a soul is to gain independence. Eliza's true awakening isn't when she fools everyone at the ambassador's ball. It's later that night when she finally stands up to Higgins, throws his slippers in his face, and demands to know what's to become of me. So once Eliza has found that voice, Shah starts systematically blowing up every single romantic expectation the audience has. He's not interested in a fairy tale. He's writing an anti-romance. This is the moment it's supposed to happen, right? The grand success, the dramatic music swells, the romantic climax. But instead of seeing a partner, an equal, what does Higgins see? A finished project, an experiment that worked, and he asks for his slippers. He has absolutely no idea that his creation is now standing right in front of him as his equal. And this is Shah's radical argument in a nutshell. He's saying that genuine growth doesn't create a debt of gratitude, it creates equality. Eliza doesn't owe Higgins her love just because he taught her how to speak properly. In fact, her new independent soul demands that she reject a man who still wants to treat her like a thing. And all of this leads to the ending, the part that absolutely shocked audiences at the time. But for a woman who has truly found herself, it's the only possible conclusion. So the myth ends in a marriage. Shah's play ends with Eliza walking out the door. People literally begged him to change it, to let them get married. But Shah refused. He even wrote this fiery essay after the play explaining that for Eliza to marry Higgins would be to enslave herself all over again. At the end of the day, victory for Eliza isn't a wedding ring. It's realizing she doesn't need her creator anymore. Her freedom, her independence, that is the happy ending. She is finally, completely her own person. So when you lay it all out like this, you can really see just how brilliant Shah's strategy was. He didn't just write a new ending. He took the myth apart, piece by piece. The creator, the creation, the method, the outcome, and he inverted every single one to build this powerful new argument about what it means to be free. And that leaves us with a question that feels just as urgent today as it did more than a century ago. Who are the Pygmalions in our world trying to shape other people into their own perfect image? And, maybe more importantly, when do the statues decide they've had enough and just walk away?
Welcome back. Today, we're diving into George Bernard Shaw's classic play, Pygmalion, to break down how language becomes the ultimate tool for shaping class, identity, and, you guessed it, power. So here's our game plan. We're going to look at how language acts as a gatekeeper, how it can be both a passport and a cage, and even how it's used as a weapon. Then we'll get into Shaw's brilliant satire before hitting the big question, what really makes the difference between people? All right, first up, the phonetic gatekeeper. And let me tell you, this play does not pull its punches. It throws you right into the deep end from the very beginning.
Wow. Just wow. That right there is Professor Henry Higgins talking about our hero, Eliza Doolittle. And it sets the stakes sky high, doesn't it? In the world of this play, how you speak literally determines your right to exist.
You know, what Shaw is getting at here is that language is the real power player. Forget money, forget who your parents are, it's all about the sounds coming out of your mouth. It's this invisible engine that runs the whole show. So how exactly does it work?
Okay, so let's look at how this actually plays out. Is language a passport or is it a cage? Well, first off, it's a massive, massive barrier.
Higgins has this great term for it, the curbstone ceiling. Think of it like a glass ceiling, but it's made of sound. It's this invisible social wall that Eliza's accent builds around her, trapping her in poverty way more effectively than any real physical wall could. And this is where it gets kind of wild. Shaw boils down the huge gap between a so-called gutter snipe and a duchess to vowel sounds. That's it. It really hammers home just how flimsy and, honestly, how ridiculous these social barriers actually are.
So you're probably thinking, okay, simple. Just learn the accent, get the golden ticket, and you're all set, right? Well, not so fast. Shaw shows us it's way, way more complicated than that.
Yeah, just look at this. Language is her passport, for sure. It gets her into the fancy parties. But it's also a cage. Suddenly, she doesn't fit in with her old life, but she's not really one of the upper class either. She's stuck, trapped between two worlds, and the accent is just a mask. And this is the really deep part. It's not just about her accent. She says she's forgotten her old language. Think about that for a second. It means her whole identity, how she sees the world. It's all been rewritten. It's a fundamental change to who she is. So, we've seen language as a barrier and an identity shaper. Now let's talk about language as a weapon, a tool for power and complete control.
At the beginning, Higgins is a master of this. He completely dominates Eliza, not by being physically stronger, but by being smarter with his words. He literally talks circles around her, using phonetics to bully and control her every move.
But, and this is the best part, the tables turn. Eliza learns to use that weapon herself, and when she finally stands up to him and says this so calmly, so clearly, boom, she just takes all of his power away in an instant.
And that's the real arc of the play, right here. It starts with Higgins's total verbal domination. Then Eliza masters the skill herself, and finally, she uses it to declare her independence. It's a complete 180-degree reversal.
Okay, but Shaw isn't just saying learn to speak properly. He's also being a bit of a trickster here. He uses the play to make fun of the whole idea that there's even a correct way to speak in the first place.
And he does this in one of the funniest, most brilliant scenes in the entire play. Picture this, a super fancy, high society tea party, and in walks Eliza, ready to test out her brand new, perfect accent. So with this beautiful, perfect pronunciation, she starts talking about, well, murder and her family's drinking problems. Just shocking stuff. But because she sounds so elegant, these clueless aristocrats just assume it's the latest trend. Oh, how charming, the new small talk. And that's Shaw's big joke, right? It proves his point perfectly. These people are so hung up on the sound of class that they don't even listen to the meaning of the words. It's all just surface-level noise to them.
Which brings us to the heart of it all. What really is the difference between a lady and a flower girl? After everything she's gone through, what's the big takeaway?
Think about it. We've got the new accent, the fancy clothes, a whole new identity. But what's the one thing, the single element that actually makes a real difference?
And this is it. This is the line the entire play has been building towards. Eliza finally figures it out and lays it all bare. It's not about how she acts, it's about how she's treated.
So in the end, the accent, the phonetics, that was all just a tool. A powerful tool, yeah, but it didn't change who she was inside. The real difference, the thing that actually defines a person's worth, is respect. It's all about how we treat each other.
And that's the question Shaw leaves us with. And it's just as powerful today as it was over 100 years ago. It makes you wonder, doesn't it? How often do we judge people based on how they talk? Are those phonetic gatekeepers still out there, at work, online, maybe even in our own heads, deciding who gets a seat at the table?